recording. Super. All right. So good evening, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good day, whatever time zone you've logged in from. And it is my absolute distinct privilege and huge honor to host Leon VanderPol yet again. For those who don't know him or don't know of him, you're in for a treat. I guarantee you that. Well, he is a PT coach from the Center for Transformation. Thank you, Leon, for the time for this open house with Back to Source coaching. You and your work both have such a special charisma. And this open house, as I was sharing with you, has drawn close to 77 accomplished coaches who are keen to hear from you and understand more about your work and how they can integrate it into their life and work. So as many of you already know, Leon's program is really called the Deep Coaching Intensive Program. He does many programs, but that's the program we've collaborated with him on. And delighted to share that the very first program that we ran in April was oversubscribed. And having been through the program myself, both Nidhi and me, I'm just thrilled to continue our association. It's like when you've tasted something good, you just feel like sharing it with the world. And that's really what inspires me to continue to bring this work here to all of you. So I'm just really also very grateful for this overwhelming response that we have received to your work, Leon, and just so happy to continue this partnership with you. Your work and you are simply divine, and the ease in which you support us as coaches to embrace this great inner work, first for ourselves, most importantly, and then allow to be that space in which we invite our participants in mysterious, yet completely masterful and magical, and yet completely magnificent way. So we're also delighted to share that the February program, which is when we're going to run DCI again, we has now our 10 seats left to offer. And I really hope those of you who feel called to this work will join us in February. And if not, I'm sure that you will be touched and you will join when you feel ready to join this program. So we've already received so many questions, Leon, so I don't want to waste too much time. I've tried to interweave them all together to engage in like a meaningful conversation between you and me. But I encourage everyone else, if any question comes up or pops up in your mind as we're going around, just please type it into the chat box so that we can, address it either now or in a follow-up session.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, please. Questions are welcome. Yes.
All right. I just also have to share that since, a large number of people present on this call are really from our Coach for Life graduate community, the work that I do with Peter, I just wanted to share my own experience of how Leon's work builds and actually grounds on the brilliance that Peter has really introduced us to. And it supports me as an individual to take my own mastery to a deeper level of understanding for myself first, and then to support a client. It's also like many of you who know me, I only do work that's rooted in spirituality and that is supportive of a personal mastery journey. And Leon's work is exactly like that. And what is fantastic about it is that as much as it is rooted in spirituality, it's hugely practical in its application. So Leon, thank you once again. And I'm really just I hope Sanjeev is on the call along with Jasmine, because both had a similar question. And their question was really about what exactly is deep coaching? And if you can walk us through that in terms of how you hold it, what's different about it in comparison to the many programs that are transformational that are being offered. So if you can just shed light on that, we can set the ball rolling.
So if it's okay with you, I'll share a little bit of my background
Of course,
as I speak to this question.
of course,
That helps create a sense of context
of
for the work itself, and people then see my own development into the work, and then helps kind of say what this work is intended to really do for people. So many folks on the call, I realize, don't know me. So originally I am from Canada. I'm Canadian by birth, but I have lived in Taiwan now for close to 21 years. I haven't even lived in Canada for about 25 years. So this is really kind of my home here in Taiwan of late. And I began coaching in 2006, became a professional certified coach. I took a good but fairly standard coach training program. Now, up until then, my work had primarily been kind of corporate training and development work, facilitation and training, kind of working with those two. And I was pointed towards coaching at one point, and I thought, yeah, that's something I'd like to try out. It seems like a good fit with facilitation work and training work and just the general kind of personal or human development work that I was interested in doing. And then something happened along the way as I was getting trained, is that I found that I kind of fell in love with coaching. And I found that in those coaching conversations that I was having, I was able to go to a deeper place with people than I had really been able to experience in these more collective experiences, such as a facilitated experience or even like a training experience. And it was those more intimate, more personal, more real conversations that really attracted me to go further with coaching. But I was working in this executive corporate space. And it took a few years for me to begin to slowly move away from that, because at the same time as all this was happening, I was on my own kind of spiritual journey, but more importantly, a kind of transformational journey into an understanding of really, who I am at the core of my being. What is my purpose and place in this world? How do I live into that deeper expression of myself that wanted to emerge through my work and through my offerings into the world to be of true service to humanity? And still so often working in the corporate realm, I felt, people have their walls up, and there's just kind of a limit to what we were able to do in those spaces. And as I began to move out of the corporate and begin to offer my services into a more public sphere, I began to notice people coming to me for different kinds of coaching and being open to different kind of experiences which would take them closer and closer to that essential part of who they are, that core of their own being. And I'll just share with you one experience I had that was fundamental in helping me understand that there was a greater potential for the coaching space than I ever had dreamed possible. And more importantly, as I was doing coach training with a company called International Coach Academy, it was greater than anything that I was training people to do. So here was the experience. It was me coaching a woman distance, thousands of kilometers apart, and it was our final session of 12. And for some reason, she decided at that point that she wanted to move away from the kind of career work that we've been doing, very transactional coaching, like career development work, if you will. And she started to tell me about a time when she was young and she'd been sexually abused by an uncle. And this was just a huge outpouring of emotion that came with it. And my coach training at that moment kicked in and said, coaches don't go there. We don't do this. And yet it was, in a sense, too late. She's, sharing of this great grief that she's held well into her 30s. And so I just kind of turned into myself at that point and said, what is it that I need to do here? This is one thing I've learned, is just to really trust my own inner guidance. This is, what is it I need to do here with her? And the nudge, the impulse I got was simply just love her. So I literally just began to sit kind of with my eyes closed and my hands open and just began to send love. And the most amazing thing started to happen. She slowly began to stop talking. And it was almost as though this beautiful energy vortex opened. And the two of us just sat in this profound sacred silence for about 20 minutes. And then it felt like it slowly began to contract, and we both came out of this altered experience where really it felt like the two of us became as one, that there was no coach and coachee anymore. There was this unified state. And we both, if we could have looked at each other, we would have looked at each other and said, what was that just happened? Neither of us had had any previous experience in something like that. I didn't know what to make of it at the time, but I recognized that it was something very important, that some kind of a healing had happened in there for her, in that space of just unconditional love. And so I tucked that away. And as I went through my coaching training and working, and as the years went on, I started to notice that there was this kind of call amongst a certain people that were coming to me for deeply transformative work, a call to heal certain aspects of themselves. We might call it the shadow. It's a psychological term. Some people call it personal gravity. You might call it your egoic self concept. There's all these different terms. There's this kind of inner call to begin to heal this, because there's simultaneously a call to grow beyond it, into this self-actualized place centered on this essential knowing of who I am and my purpose and my place in this world. This journey of self-actualization that so many of us are on. Some are dabbling in it, some are fully committed to it, some are just beginning. But there is this kind of call amongst all of them to say, okay, so how do I step into and truly embody this awakened self that's there, but I don't really know who it is or what it is that's emerging, but I know a lot that's still standing in the way. These old structures, these old wounds, this old stuff that I'm carrying that is no longer who I am, but is still within me. How do I shed this? So I began to experiment more in the coaching space with bringing in this kind of concept of how do we begin to heal, but not heal just to say, well, I'm just going to return to some kind of normality, but heal in the sense of heal into wholeness and completion, to know myself as I am beyond the veil of my egoic constructs, beyond the veil of the pain that I carry, beyond the veil of all this self-identity that I've carried that really is not the truth of who I am.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where the work ended up going after all these years. It was into a place of, how do we bring healing into coaching? That was a big question for me for many years. Is there a place for healing work in coaching without it becoming not coaching?
Yeah.
So what that gave rise to was the deep coaching work. It gave rise to a method of working with people who are on something that we're calling a journey of transformation. And I don't mean transformation like the way it's used very loosely today, like everybody loves the word, like transformational coach and transformational leadership and transforming organizations, and it's just tossed around. It loses the essence of its meaning. When we talk about true transformation of the human being, this is profound work. This is going into the core of self to begin to recognize all that is not true, all that has been bought into, all the falsities and the self-images, the false images, the negative thinking patterns, all of these things that are there that really act as this kind of shadow to the brilliance that we are. So the people that are on a journey of transformation, they want to connect and grow into this magnificence. And so deep coaching is positioned to be able to meet that, you might call it the awakening mind, the mind that is ready to grow into a self-knowing that lies beyond these kind of egoic constructs that we've allowed to make a home in our mind for a lifetime. Okay? So that's a long answer, but it also hopefully gives people a bit of a sense of kind of where this work came from in a very general way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leon. And my bad. I just, it's like I just made an assumption that everybody really knows Leon, and so I just jumped straight into it at the deep end already. But thank you so much for sharing. And from my own experience, is and I worked largely, like 98%, in the corporate sector. And
Mm,
I do feel that there is a huge yearning for this work within the corporate sector, huge earning, and I think that this to be able to meet this yearning is really where that magic and mystery both lie.
yeah.
My question to you then is that how would you define what is a deep coach's responsibility to what exactly is the role that a deep coach plays in such a situation?
When you say such a situation, sorry, can you clarify what that is?
So, what I mean is that when you see that there is this yearning for this work that I call for deep work, as I've now understood it to be, and there is this baggage of the past, and there is this great sense of wanting to step into the future, uh,
Mm.
since there has been some amount of churning. Um, how would you say that a deep coach, I mean, what's the role that the deep coach plays to support and hold space for this deep dive of me?
Yeah. You actually used a very good term that we use in the course, and that is what it is to hold space for this evolutionary process. And here's what I've noticed over the years is that there's a simplicity to this work that is utterly beautiful. A lot of folks learn a lot in coaching training about models and methodologies and approaches and powerful questions and structures, and there's all of this going on. And yet when it comes to working with people who are really ready to go on this deep dive within themselves, to really kind of face the shadows and to also step into this true I, the I at the core of their being more completely, to come to know that self, there's a self-volition to the process.
Hmm.
It's self-volitional. So the beauty is that the coach doesn't have to be this kind of driver of this experience or the driver of it. The coach's role is really to create let's call it a container, a space, a held space, in which that self-volitional process can do its work in the awakening mind. In a sense, we're helping people to get out of their own way,
Hmm.
right? Because as we help people get out of their own way, in other words, that often means, let's say, toning down the thinking mind and the intellectualizing. Because when people are on this journey, as you know, Amrita, there's a desire to try to figure things out. Because the old paradigm that people work in is that when they get stuck or confused or doubtful, they figure out a solution. But transformation has all those hallmarks of people feeling stuck at times, unsure, not sure where to go. They come to coaching for it, and they're trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
But the reality is, transformation is not something you figure out. Transformation unfolds of its own volition and begins to reveal. So how do we help people, in a sense, get out of their own way? And one of those things is to tone down the intellectual mind
Hmm.
and begin to connect with that which is transcends the intellect, which is being level awareness.
Hmm.
Right? So we're dropping into being level awareness and spending time at the level of being. And then noticing what begins to quite naturally and organically emerge for people when they start to connect with that within themselves. There's more wisdom, more understanding, more energy, more potential, like it's all there. It's just that people are so disconnected from it. And then they get into their intellect thinking that somehow if they can just figure out a way to get through this, it'll all be great on the other end. If I could just figure out.
Hmm.
So we're letting go of that. So the coach's role is twofold in a way. It's one, to be able to stand as a living exemplar, a way shower of transformation, meaning that the coach themselves cannot coach transformation unless the coach themselves has been willing to journey the journey.
Yeah.
You cannot coach this from the book. I read a book about it, and therefore I can help you on your transformational journey. This one is coached because you, the coach, have gone through the fire of experience. Okay. So the coach's role then begins to stand as the one. And that doesn't mean that you're totally transformed or whatever that even looks like, right? totally I don't know what that is. But there is this commitment, there is this journeying that has happened. And as you do that, you begin to stand as one who knows. As you stand as one who knows, people then are able to see in you the way shower. And they'll say, there's something in you that I think is a potential in me.
Hmm.
And they will turn to the coach. So the coach then, right, becomes the exemplar, one saying, this is possible for you. This is a journey fraught with turmoil. It's challenging. It's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life.
Hmm.
But it has an extraordinary, beautiful reward at the end of this light at the end of the tunnel. So they stand there as that one. Two, then there's this process of holding space, which is to become a witness, if you will, to an unfolding that is already desiring to happen in people. So help people get out of their way.
Hmm.
And then the third really is kind of like, and this is the title of the book, to energize shifts in being. So as we help people tap into their core essence,
Hmm.
there is a desire to shift into and embody, to become the living embodiment of that which they understand to be possible for themselves as a way of being. So the coach's role becomes one of not intellectualizing a process or intellectualizing a journey, but creating a space in which another person is able to tap into the deepest, truest part of themselves and to begin to embody that as a lived reality in the coaching space.
Hmm.
Not after, not like some action they'll do later, next week, I'll make an action to step into beingness. It's how do we facilitate this in the coaching space? Because that is the ultimate in terms of a healing experience for someone, to be the living embodiment, even if it's just for a moment, of that higher reality. It transfigures, it reconfigures cellular structures, neurological structures, and structures of consciousness so that they are becoming more and more that which they desire. So those are just three kind of examples of roles of the deep coach.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I
Yeah.
do recall from reading the forward to your book as well as then actually reading the book myself is, you say that your transformation enables another's transformation.
Yes.
And and uh, and I must say also that when I read the book first time, I was completely blown out, but I still didn't understand what I had to do to transform and then become that space and that presence to support another's transformation, which is
Yes.
really what the course that foundation and mastery that have been through with you really brought that book alive for me to begin that embodiment journey, which is still in progress, and I think will be in progress still almost I don't know to when, but it will
Yeah.
definitely in progress.
It's ongoing. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But the ability to understand that all that I really need to do is hold space, and yet as simple as holding space is, there is so much work that I need to go through to be able to do that.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like there's a simplicity to it. And yet, as you said, the work to get to that place of simplicity, it's so much, in a sense, unlearning that has to happen,
Yeah.
even for experienced coaches, sometimes especially for experienced coaches.
Yeah, and I find that given the all the work that for me personally and many on this call, because the work that we've been trained in as coaches is so grounded in that sense of in that spiritual higher consciousness already as coaches, that the unlearning was not so much as bringing the sense of practice and consistency of practice uh, to my beingness, to
Yeah.
experience that shift for myself.
Yes.
I don't want to give everything away, and yet I really would invite you to share a little bit about the sense of practice and the importance of practices for a coach to support building that space and
Yeah.
holding.
And that ties in with another question that I frequently get asked, which is around, okay, Leon, what are the tools and techniques and
Yeah.
models that you're going to give me in this course? Okay. So one of the things that people have to understand is that when you move from a transactional coaching approach, It's quite linear in the way that it works, to a truly transformational model, which we're talking about here in deep coaching or transformational approach. We move from the linear to the multidimensional. And what happens is that things like tools and techniques and worksheets and models and structures, a lot of this just starts to become kind of irrelevant. And we start to have to learn what it's like to be with another person in a kind of non-linear paradigm of growth and how we support that. So things like structured sessions, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, we're going to move to this, we're going to move to that, and I've got my questions and I've got my accountability, and all of that becomes less important than your capacity to really sense and sit with another into an emerging potential, right? Like a generative potential. So we move into deep coaching work from this idea of models and methodologies and all that to practices. And this is what you're referring to, Amrita, that in transformative work and transformative coaching, we can turn to transformative practices. And many of you likely are doing different kinds of practices in your own personal and spiritual growth. So transformative practices are intended to be practices that you commit to for long periods of time because they actually support deep transformative growth in you. And it's the same in the coaching context. So we work with 9 practices. And if you were to take any one of those practices and literally mine that single practice to the full degree that that practice offers you, your life would change in immeasurable ways. Immeasurable ways.
Yeah.
We have 9 practices. We have 9 of them. And they're not wholly complex on the surface. For example, I'll give people a very simple practice that we work with. Let there be silence. Let there be silence. And people say, oh, that's no problem. I can let there be silence. It's that easy. And yet you wouldn't believe how people struggle with that in their own personal lives, creating space for true silence, but in the coaching sessions too. Why? Because, well, if I'm just sitting in silence, then I'm not doing anything. If I'm not doing anything, I'm not offering value. If I'm not offering value, my client will reject me. If my client rejects you, my financials are in trouble. And so I better not be silent. I better ask a question, move things forward, get things going. So you see that one single practice is connected to this whole range of thought that leads the coach straight out of silence.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas I've said to you, Amrita, and others in the course too, that the most powerful deep coaching sessions I've had, and this is with people whose readiness for the experience is very high, folks. This is not by any means all, but I have deep coaching sessions where we sit for 40 minutes in silence. You say, well, that's not deep coaching. That's not coaching. And I'll say, isn't it? Everything is happening in the silence. Everything is happening in the silence. And people come out of those experiences and it's just this place of embodied understanding, transcendent awareness, and true knowing that just it radiates from them. And it's like, okay, so what, there's more you can do in a session than that? Like, is there a higher thing you'd like to offer someone in a coaching session than absolute embodiment of radiant self and knowing? I don't think so. I think that's pretty much the pinnacle. So you see, there's so much opportunity just in the practice of silence, not only in a coaching session, but in our own lives as we support our own growth. But as you're saying, Amrita, it's that commitment to the practice. And so for years and years after the coursework, students come back to the practices because each one has this capacity to continue or to resolve or to open up new pathways of your own growth experience, and thus your coaching, right? Because your coaching begins to reflect your own progress. You can only support someone's growth to the degree, in this sense, that you have done the work yourself. People who are ready to are beyond you will not come to you for coaching. Not in this work, maybe in a corporate setting, but not in this work. Yeah. So I hope that speaks a bit to what you're talking about in terms of that practice piece.
That and so much more. And
Yeah.
it really ties in with another question that I'll come to. But what I found that was absolutely remarkable is that given that it's in this virtual format and spread over these 10 Mondays, the way that you've structured this program, I really found that introducing the way you introduce that practice every week, and then supporting that integration through the week before the next practice comes in was so hugely valuable in my own experience of it. And this really comes to a question from someone. I can't remember their name in the moment, but it is really that when this work is so deep and so intense and so immersive, what's the efficacy of it in a virtual format? And
Yeah.
whilst I've shared my experience, would love to hear from you on your response to it as well.
Well, that's the beauty of this work. And that's what surprised me the most around that experience that I shared, where I sat with that woman for 20 minutes in silence, and the vortex that opened up, where it felt like two became as one. It felt like I'd never been closer to another human being at a soul level than in that moment.
Mm.
And what was healing for her was healing for me. It was this nourishment of the soul for both. And we were thousands of miles apart. And I just thought, how is this possible? I thought proximity mattered. And that was the day that that whole notion that somehow proximity matters just evaporated. That consciousness is not time-space bound. That in Indra's net, if you will, the nodes of Indra's net are all connected to each other.
Yeah.
And when we sit in these spaces together where we are choosing to invite in a higher consciousness, where we're choosing to step in to the greater reality that we are, again, just distance evaporates and we are all there in that space. And you know it now, right? How palpable it is, how visceral you feel it in your body, in your spirit, in your soul. It's just all right there. And we bring people together from around the world. Like I recognize this is, for the India group, but the online experience will be when you allow it to be, when you kind of open yourself up, because obviously if you're sitting online and you're all closed and shutting down, there's a challenge. But we're creating a space in which everybody can show up as they are, vulnerable, but feeling safe, held in a spiritual partnership. And we're all understanding that we're all there for that work, which is to step into the embodiment of our highest potential to the degree that we can grasp that in the current moment. And again, just that idea of space just evaporates as we do the work together. And that happens in coaching sessions all the time for me. It's just deeply profound work that way.
Yeah. And I know it now, having the course also allows that witnessing of coaching live and hearing in on coaching, which is so integral to really build. It helped me build my belief, and then my ability to be able to engage with this work, which is also, I think, so fantastic in terms of the way the program is structured. You also referred to a couple of things that I just wanted to talk to. One was in terms of the readiness of the client, and the other that this is this deep transformational work. And yet, I am aware, and I also find in my own experience that there are clients that some sessions may be deep and some sessions may be just purely transactional and some may be just developmental. So what would be a deep coach's ability to engage with clients and meet them where they are, if you can?
Well, that's precisely the wording, right? It's we as coaches, and it doesn't matter what kind of coach you conceive yourself to be, as coaches, our role is to really meet our clients where they are at. So one of what the challenges that I've noticed in my many years of training coaches is that many coaches go to kind of foundational coach training programs and they learn kind of a transactional, what I call transactional developmental style of coaching. And not many coaches are trained to coach true transformation and coach transformationally. So what can happen is that there's a readiness for a client, and the client may be exhibiting that readiness in ways that are not necessarily explicit, because they may not be completely aware of what's happening within themselves, but they are exhibiting certain signals, and there is a readiness to go deep. But because the coach doesn't have that capacity, and coaches say this to me all the time, they say, no, I sense there's more I can do with my client, but when we get to this point, I just don't know what to do anymore. And so what happens when a coach thinks, I don't know what to do anymore, I know there's something, they will go back to and rely on what they do know, where the coach is comfortable, and invite the client to go there. And the client, because they're often not aware, will go, okay, and they'll acquiesce and they'll go where the coach wants to go. But what's actually happened is the coach wasn't able to meet the client where the client's at. So if the client's coming in wanting a transactional experience or kind of a developmental coaching experience, and the coach has that capacity, then the beautiful thing is we can meet them there because we know we can coach that way. But the other side of it is, if someone is really ready for these deeper experiences, can you meet that person there? Because if you don't, you're bringing a transactional approach to a transformational coaching session. It's a little bit like that crude idiom I mentioned. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. It's like the wrong tool for the job. And then what happens is people will walk away from you as a coach, because at some level, even if your coaching is good, at some level, it's not meeting them where they're at, and they know it. Though they may not be able to express what they really need, because this transformational journey for so many is like they don't know what's happening within themselves. There's just this sense that something is wanted or desired, and they're kind of So if the coach isn't able to say, hey, this is what's happening for you, and this is what we can do together, then the client won't be met. So what we're teaching people to do is I call the coaching continuum, right? With transactional on one end and transformational on the other end, is give people the capacity to go to the deepest of the deep. And knowing that they've likely already had some training in more transactional, they can still meet people there if that's where people are at for that session. So a deep coaching is not an agenda. Like, I'm not coming in saying, right, I love to go deep, therefore you shall go deep because I'm so into this deep stuff. And when you do surface level stuff, I'm not so interested. So I'm going to take you into the deep zone. No, it's not like that. We have the capacity to really just hold a space for people where they're at, coach them where they're at. And because we now are comfortable coaching deeply, we can kind of open this door, this portal, and say, listen, if you're ready to go deep, I'm here. And I'm confident and capable to go to these places with you.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
And there's this question from Sri Rupa, and she's here on the call, I know, that ties into that. Given what you just shared, is the sense that then as a coach, how do I know that coaching will really make that difference or not, in terms of if what you're saying is to be completely indifferent to the outcome, then as a coach, how do I know whether I'm being effective or not?
Okay, I never said we're indifferent to the outcome. I just want to be clear on that.
Okay, thank you.
But just to rephrase that, maybe rephrase the question a bit. Yeah, this is not about indifference to outcomes. Oh my goodness.
No, I'm
not really sure what the question is trying to ask. Sorry.
I'm trying very hard to keep it to the structure of the question and not bring my knowledge of deep coaching in it as I share it with you. that is a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
And yet, okay, let me say it as it is, and read it out actually as it is.
Okay.
The question is really, how important is it to believe that the coaching that I'm engaging in will definitely make a difference? Should I be indifferent to the outcome? I'm reading it as it is.
Okay.
So that's easier.
No, you're not indifferent to the outcome. We rejoice and celebrate the outcomes. Yeah. The first part of the question, just could you repeat it again? Just that first phrase.
How important is it to believe that coaching will definitely make a difference?
Yes, I would say it's probably pretty helpful to believe that coaching will make a difference if you're going to be coaching people in their lives.
Hmm.
You have to believe in the efficacy of the work. That's for sure. And most people who come to deep coaching have some experience with coaching already. We do get people coming absolutely who have none, but they're often on themselves this journey of transformation. And there is a kind of resonance with the work that calls them to just explore more of what this means. But they may not necessarily say, I'm a coach or I'm going to be a coach. We get many of those through our programs.
Hmm.
But those who do have some background with coaching as a coach or having been coached generally carry a sense of, like I said, the efficacy of the work. And that's what attracts them to learn more about the work, that come into our program and learn. Because if you have doubts about whether coaching works, then you're not holding that for your client.
Correct.
They'll pick that up immediately, that you are in a state of doubt, maybe around your own abilities or the process, the method. So coming into the work with the fullness of confidence is going to be necessary for you to step into the world. You don't have to come into the course with that. You can come into the course completely doubting and just allow the course to inform your experience and your understanding. And then as you come out of the course, you may have a different view, right? But if you're going to go into the world with your work as a coach, yeah, then you need to, for sure, believe in the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are still so many different threads of questions, but I do want to take a question that's come in the chat box, which is from,
Please, yeah. Yeah.
and that question is really that from everything that you shared, where is the spiritual element in everything that you shared?
Good. Okay. Good question. What I've spoken about so far are two of what I call the tenets of coaching. There are three tenets of deep coaching. The first is the transformative journey piece, and I've spoken about that. The second is the healing piece, that we're positioning coaching as a healing modality, not healing as in the sense that something's broken and we're fixing it, but healing as movement into wholeness and completion, the reality and greater truth of who we are at the core of our being, self-actualization. The third piece of deep coaching is that deep coaching is a spirit-based modality. So many coaching approaches do not weave in spirituality as part of coaching. In fact, some actively shun it. But in deep coaching, we don't. We recognize that every human being is a spiritual being. We're starting with that presumption. And we're also recognizing that we are part of something much greater than ourselves. And there are all kinds of different terms to what people may call that greater consciousness, that greater divinity. I just use the word spirit with a capital S as an umbrella term because I like people to self-define that. We work with people from all different spiritual and spiritualities, faiths, religious backgrounds. So it's not my place to define it for people. But we're recognizing that we're part of this greater life force. And that life force is alive in us in different ways. And in the work of holding space for transformation, we are really evoking that inner spirit wisdom, that inner greater consciousness, that higher self piece to really come to the fore, to really be present. We're not steering around it. We are actively calling it forth. And we're recognizing that it's a kind of partnership, if you will. We call it spiritual partnering. A spiritual partner partnering within ourselves, with our own spirit essence, our soul, our beingness. And we're also recognizing that we can tap into this greater tapestry of life, this life force, this divinity, to help us really accelerate and give kind of uplift energy to this transformational practice that we're undergoing. So spirituality is woven into it all. But here's what's important is that as deep coaches, we're not here to define our clients' spiritual beliefs or to impose any spiritual belief system upon another person. So deep coaching works for all human beings across the world because it's not founded on a particular set of beliefs. It's saying we recognize we are spiritual beings and that we're part of something, a tapestry of life that is innately wise, benevolent, And just if we tap into that, and if you, my client, tap into that within yourself, start to notice what changes in you when you open your heart, when you begin to love, when you begin to feel the life force move through you. Just that, notice what changes. You don't have to believe anything about it, that it's called this or does that. Just allow the experience to be what it is. So that's why I say we evoke spirit, and we recognize that spirit is an essential partner in this transformational journey of becoming our highest self, which is a soul essence self. Yeah.
I'm so glad that Arvind asked this question, and just as you shared what you did early on, I was like just taken back to the first time I heard you speak, and that's really that resonance that I felt so deeply to want to learn more about your work towards my own mastery. So thank you so much for answering that call for me. So.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And that really takes me to the next um, well, I won't say set of questions, but the sense of what you speak about in saying that when you invite spirit in and allow for that experience. So is that experience something that happens in the coaching session or before or after? And if you can share a little bit about that as well, please.
Well, it's variable depending on the person. There's no pattern, if you will. Every human being is at a different place in this journey of knowing themselves. Some are more spiritually attuned already, some more spiritually practiced, if you will. They've been on the journey longer, or they've dabbled in certain spiritual work or methodologies or minds, whatever, longer. And so their experiences may be different. It may be for them before, during, after. But the main work of the deep coach is, again, not to impose, but to really just create a space, a coaching space in which a person can connect with that higher aspect of themselves, their higher mind, their higher beingness, and really tap into it for wisdom, for knowledge, for energy, for perspective, for whatever it may be. And what people will notice, because consciousness is like vibrational realities, yeah? So the higher our consciousness goes, the kind of faster we vibrate at, our vibration becomes lighter. And what also happened then, as the coach's role, to help people shift into these higher vibrational realities, these higher consciousness, then new paradigms of reality and possibility automatically fall in place. Now, this is something that's very hard for people who hear this for the first time to conceive of.
Yeah.
But it's like, instead of the coach trying to shift perspectives, yeah, because that's what a lot of coaching is about. Well, I'm just going to ask enough questions from enough different angles that we can shift this person's perspective on their situation. But there's another way to shift perspectives. And this is the way we approach it in deep coaching. And that is when you change levels of consciousness, because each level of consciousness has its own built-in reality. That is something extraordinary. So once you shift someone's consciousness, it's like the whole paradigm changes. I like the image of the Rubik's Cube. It just kind of falls into place, this new paradigm of experience. It's like it settles on the person. And when it settles in the mind, they literally begin to perceive in ways that are reflective of that paradigm of consciousness, that level of consciousness. And this is where things get so interesting. So my work isn't to help the person shift perspectives. My work is to help them step into new paradigms of reality and experience, ones that they're ready for, ones that they're eager to, in a sense, yearning to experience, and then notice how perspectives shift automatically when you do. Ooh, it's good. Like, it's good. And then you just sit there with, as a coach, just like witnessing this person in this greater reality for themselves, right?
It sounds like that there are just two people witnessing at the end, and there's some magic that's happening in the space.
Yeah, for both, right? For both.
For both. Yeah. And I also know from our own cohort and from my own experience is that we're all necessarily um, spiritual beings. It's just that some of us are aware of it and some of us are not. And so when you step into the program, it's not necessary for you as a qualification to be that spiritually aware
Oh,
person.
exactly.
And at the
Exactly.
same time, it's not necessary for a client to want or be that spiritually aware person. And so it's just that what you call spiritual partnering is is that aspect of just that knowingness that we're spiritual beings and partnering to see what unfolds.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Because very rarely, if ever, does a deep coaching conversation I have get to be about what a person believes about spirituality. Because it's not that, it's they're starting to look at their inner reality, their inner operating system, that coding through which we've lived our life. So much of that coding is conditioned from a young age, right? So we're really starting to look at that, and how the unconscious mind begins to work in this space, and kind of shine light on that, begin to unravel it, explore it, and ultimately, if healing needs to happen, have that to happen. And we invoke kind of the sense that when we invite in the greater consciousness that is available to us, then it goes to work in the mind and it supports this journey. But it's not that we're sitting there talking about, a person's specific spiritual beliefs. It doesn't go there. That's why you say you don't have to come into the program having something, or even your clients having something. It's just woven into the fabric of the work, rather than something explicit that we plop on the table to, we're doing this spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
Not that way at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask you one last question, really, and then open it up to everyone else who wishes to ask, since I find it most difficult to refrain from what I know and frame a question to support somebody else's knowing. So I'll just open it up for more questions.
Okay.
But my question really is the sense of, once you become this deep coach and you go through this whole experience for yourself and feel comfortable in the deep coaching space, um, I sense and know that there will be very few people in that community of deep coaches. And as that number keeps growing with your work in this space, what is the kind of um, support or next steps to be able to stay connected and continue to integrate this work as individuals as well as a collective? If you can please share some.
Yeah. So the beauty of the course is that it's not just a course, that you are becoming part of a global community of practitioners of this work. We use a platform that you may not be familiar with. You may be. It's called Mighty Networks. And what we can do with this platform is that we can house our courses and the content and the Learn site in private spaces, and we can create a forum or platform, if you will, for all the coaches who have gone through our programs and all the people who've gone through our programs to connect and to continue to foster and do the work together. So it's an amazing platform. It's got elements of social media woven into elements of course design, such if you're familiar with something like Thinkific, platforms like that. So it combines the best of both worlds. And the whole purpose of the Transformational Coaching Collective is to continue to facilitate the growth and development of those people who have gone through our programs, and to connect them with a global community of practitioners who are doing the work in various ways in their various corners of the earth. So it's not just, for example, if everybody comes in India, that when they go in there, they're only with the India group. In the course, they will be, in that piece they'll be, but there is also this other aspect, this public space. And even we have some private spaces for alumni in which things are happening. We have monthly events, we have ongoing peer coaching practice. This is all free, and it's just included in that. And so that's all bundled up with the course. And we call it the Transformational Coaching Collective, because ultimately that's what we are, right? And the whole purpose is to support ongoing people's learning and development as coaches, as deep coaches, practitioners of this form of work, and just to support our own inner growth as well. Yeah.
Yeah, with Mighty Networks, you've created your very own Indra's net in
Yeah.
some way, for sure, right? And it is a continuous journey. So it's with the practices, and so it's beautiful to have that kind of support. Um, Arvind had a question which he's put in the chat box in terms of what's the length of a typical deep coaching session, and is there like a deep coaching journey? And I'm expanding on what Arvind has shared, like you have a coaching journey, or is it just a one standalone session that comes in and comes out, or how does that
Yeah.
work?
It can be both. It can absolutely be both. I do one-off sessions all the time. And because the focus of a deep coaching session is the experience of shifted self and being within the session can easily stand on its own as that kind of healing, uplifting experience of consciousness growth. A typical session is generally an hour. Okay, so deep coaching does not lend itself to something like laser coaching, like a 20-minute, zip, 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 and you're out kind of format. It's not that. If you're going to help people really drop into the depth of being, you need to create enough kind of time and space for that to happen. So very typically, an hour is a good amount of time to expect. Some of my sessions go a bit longer, 75 minutes. Sometimes they go an hour and a half, depending on what someone's working through. Other times, 45 minutes. Yeah. But there's normally a kind of pattern I've noticed in sessional work. The pattern is that people come in with a situation or issue that they want to work on. And it takes a little bit to, kind of unravel that to the point where you get to that level that's non-situational. That's the underworkings, you might call, like I said, the inner operating system, that kind of level of coding, that the situation is a doorway to. So once we kind of get there, that's where the work really, really begins. And it takes a little while to get there because people come in and they're in the drama, they're in the situation, they're thinking about it. So slowly moving beyond that takes a bit of time. And then as we move to the arc of the session into the more experiential piece, that usually happens in the latter 15 minutes, half an hour. So that's kind of a way to look at it. I work with people both short-term and long-term. Like I work with people on one-off sessions because they're so powerful in and of themselves. And I work with people over long term. And the people that I work with long term are really they're seriously committed to embodying these higher realities. But they're also recognizing very often that there's a lot of that old stuff, those old patterns of consciousness, of behavior, of thought, of emotion that really have a grip. They really have a grip. It's like neurologically speaking, they're kind of grooves in the mind. And it takes time to groove new grooves, if you will. It takes some time, but there's a commitment to it. And so there's a returning to the space week after week or every other week, depending on the pattern, to just revisit those states of consciousness, which sometimes are elusive on day-to-day levels. Yeah, they can be quite elusive. I'm busy with my work. I've got kids, I've got family, I've got so much things going on. I don't have much time for myself. And they come into the coaching space and let's revisit these things that are really important to you, but you're not necessarily creating the time and space for in your own life. So it works in all ways, short or long term. Yeah.
Super. Let me just open it out to a few questions. If anyone would like to unmute themselves, I'm enjoying this conversation, and I can go on having a conversation with Leon about his splendid work. Share and open it out to anybody who wishes to chime in with a question that will support their own learning in the moment, and also help you arrive at a decision if this is something that you want to take the deep dive with us in February. I'll just open it out to see. So just unmute yourself. I can't see everybody, so just unmute yourself.
Come in, please.
So, hi, Leon. I'm Swati.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you, how does one realize whether it's about oneself or about the coachee, whether you're ready for this journey to get into the deep spiritual self?
How does one know that? Good question, isn't it? How do you know that? How do you know when you're ready for a deep spiritual journey? Yeah.
Right.
There's times when I just become the coach. And this is one of those times. But I just take the question and I just turn it around. And I say, yes. So how do you, Swati, know when you're ready?
Um, it's I think for me at this point it's just a feeling
Yeah.
that this is something I want to explore.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't think I know, honestly.
What you have just shared with me is what 90% of the people who come to the program share. I'm not kidding. They just say something like, I just know this is where I need to be and I don't know why. Well, I'm drawn to this work and I keep coming back to it and I'm not really sure what's going on, but there's something here for me and I just have to say yes to it. You know, this is what happens when we move from the linear to the nonlinear. We move from answers to our questions to being okay with no answers, with just that place of it just is. And in this case, you know, I just know this is where I need to be and I have no reason. I can't justify it. It's just, that's it. So if
Okay.
you're feeling that, you are literally feeling and sensing what 90%, if not more, of the people who come to the program share. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
It's that simple. You know, people expect like this, like this really thing. It's like, actually, no, it's not. It's there's just this, yeah, there's something there and I need to explore and know it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And just
Thanks.
thank you, Swati, for asking that question with all your innocence.
Yeah.
And the depth of the work, as I experience the depth of the work, it's so deep, and yet the simplicity of it is so divine. I mean, it's that balance between the profoundness of that work and the divinity and purity and the simplicity of it. That
Mhm.
it's so magnetically pulling, or I feel drawn to that work. So uh, yeah, all
Yeah,
right.
that's how it goes. There's just a draw. There's just a draw. Yeah. And if you feel the draw, folks, just trust it. Just trust it that there's something there for you. Yeah. And that's how we start to learn how to move through life. That ultimately is the way of the deep coach, the way of the transformational journey, is we're learning to trust what we cannot always understand or explain. Yeah.
Thank you. I know there's a long
Thank you.
question from Arun in the chat box. I'm going to just invite you to come on in and get your voice in and hear from you. Arun?
Yeah, hi, Leon. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Firstly, I want to say you so much gratitude from my end. Like when I start to reading your book, Shift in Being, it's really helped me a lot. Currently, I am 28-year-old boy, and I'm not a coach also. It's really powerful book which I have ever I seen in my entire life. So then from there, I start to research about your works and all your videos I watched in YouTube. I did so many research about you, and it's powerful and it's really amazing. And really like to thank God for the gratitude from your work. And it's also some doubts about that. It's really painful to peeling away the onion, the
Yeah.
egotic onion. So this is I would like to share with you, and thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for saying it. And just so folks know, I use in the book, there's an image of like an onion cut. Yeah. And you can see all the rings. And I use that kind of an image to, uh, yeah, of how the ego structure kind of begins to form around our very essential self over a lifetime. So it becomes like this kind of ring of onion. And we over time learn to kind of attend to these aspects of ourself that are really born of our egoic mind, our egoic self, and to let them go, release, heal, forgive, whatever the work is around them that we need to do. And so what Arun is saying is that that work can be at times very painful work. And that is really so true. It varies from person to person, and it varies depending on kind of what that layer of self that's being attended to is. For some people, it may be past traumas of different sorts. A lot of people have had challenging upbringings in different ways. And to attend to that in service of transformation, okay, this is not psychotherapy. It's not just service because the person is feeling a bit off around it. It's in service of this journey of transformation that we're coaching. It can be incredibly challenging to face some of these shadowy aspects of ourselves. In the hero's journey, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. If not the actual model, you're familiar with it from like a movie like Lord of the Rings or something. And there always comes a point where the hero faces the abyss, where it's like death, staring them in the face. And it can feel like that at times for people when they go into the really shadowy aspects of themselves and really spend time with it. It can feel a bit like an abyss. And the light may not be there as to, well, what happens if I go through this? Will I come out of this? Will I be okay? Will I be safe on the other side? So the coach's role becomes one of, as I mentioned before, the exemplar, being the one who has walked the hero's journey and knows that the abyss piece is but a part of a journey experience. It's not the end of the journey. It's a stage in a journey. And that there is indeed light on the other end. There is indeed so much more to be experienced when one traverses these kind of metaphorical abysses within the self. But everything I've talked about today is saying that we can hold space for this. We can create a space in which people can very naturally attend to this and be safely held in the work that they're doing. And it is purely coaching work that we're doing. Okay? It's healing work, but it's coaching work as well. Yeah, it can be hard. That's the beauty of the deep coach, is we can make this journey easier for people who may not necessarily know how to do the work for themselves, or even be sure that they need to be doing this work, or confused about it, or whatever it may be. We can ease the path by being that exemplar and that coach for them. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I am the stage of 3 and 4. Like, still, I have so much fear about that, to travel that unknown path. So, yeah, it's really hurting me a lot. Yesterday also, I cried a lot. To like, still this book is with me, and you can see this.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
Like,
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's true. The journey can be very, very challenging, folks, and it's challenging for us. It's challenging for the people we'll be coaching, but what a gift of life we're giving to ourselves, and then ultimately to others as we support them through this journey. There is, in my view, there is nothing more magnificent a gift that a coach could ever bring to another human being than to support this most essential journey, right? All the transactional coachings in the world, sessions in the world, don't amount to what one session in a transformational space where somebody touches the essence of who they are and shines forth in that. I mean, that is just like all the light in the world right there. It's that big. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me check if there are any more questions in the house. So I would like to ask anything to Leon. Just unmute and come on in. And as much as I am conscious of the practice of let there be silence, I'm also conscious of the time that we're holding. Then I'll take the next question that really comes from people who shared in advance, and that's really about how do you know what aspects of a client or a coach can get in the way of supporting a deep coaching session. And I didn't ask the question, so you can't turn it back.
That's great. That's great. I'm loving this question. I'm just thinking of a number of things. I will say, one of them is kind of they're both are relatively unconscious patterns that people have. One is that they may not inherently be ready for the journey. Okay. So if someone's not really ready to go to those places within themselves, they're going to resist it. And we have to understand how that when we do this work, it can be greatly disruptive. What I mean is it can have people questioning many things about their life, like why they have made certain choices, why they experience life the way they do, what motivates them. Like it has them questioning it all. And for some folks, that can be almost frightening. Like, oh my goodness, if I really question why I do this job that I don't like, then everything that I've kind of directed to my life towards is just going to fall apart. And it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So I'm going to stay in this, be responsible, fulfill my obligations to family, and I'm just going to do it, kind of thing. So people at some level see that this journey ahead is disruptive. They become fearful of that and what that'll mean for them. And they kind of choose to remain in what the hero's journey calls the known world, like that, the world that's safe and secure, the world that I know, rather than venture into the world that I don't. So readiness is a big part of it. If people simply aren't ready for it, they're not going to go on that journey. And our role as deep coaches is not to force anybody. It's to be able to create a space in which people are most able to say yes to that which they are ready to experience. Okay. The other piece that comes up is the intellect. The intellect. Because as I said before, the intellect is such a driver of our life. Everything that feels problematic can be solved. Every time we bump up into a challenge in life, I just need to figure out a way through this. And the intellect loves to structure and think and analyze and criticize and critique and figure out and all of that. And here we go on this journey that is nonlinear, that takes us into a paradigm of experience that we don't know, and yet we're supposed to trust that when we get there, all is well. So people rely on the tools and abilities of the mind that they know work for them. Kind of, you might call their success strategies, the ones that have got me to where I am today. And my intellect has been a big part of that. So they rely on the intellect, and then they bump up into this thing called transformation, where the intellect really, really doesn't have a big role to play. And I say this, folks, because if you think about it, the intellect itself hasn't healed anything. All the intellect can do is point to what might be in need of healing or attention. But when it comes to the actual healing of ego patterns that have been carried within the body and the mind for a lifetime, the intellect isn't the tool for that. In that way, we need to go into that deeper being level awareness and begin to work in a far more heart-centered, love consciousness kind of state of being. So as I say, the intellect gets in the way because people are going to try to figure this thing out because it's worked in the past and then realize that's not working. They get very frustrated and upset. And we have to be able to provide them with, again, these experiences which show them that when they can drop the intellect, they begin to open to these new paradigms of experience where the known becomes revealed, so to speak, in the mind, but only once the intellect is dropped. So those are just two examples, and there's lots of things that people can do to get in the way, but those are two big ones. Yeah.
Thank you. As we begin to wrap up for today's session, I just want to share with all of you is that the book that Arun talked about, and that's alongside my bedside as well, is called, and Nidhi's just showing it up there. It's like just becomes your companion, not just for the course, but your companion for life. And that's really, Leon's book, which is A Shift in Being, which is part of the program. So we will send it to you, once you join the program. So you have it in advance and you can go through it. And having been through the program myself, and I'm sure Nidhi will vouch for it too, is that read the book before February and then reread the book through the program in February. And I'm doing my third reading of the book now, and it is still so eternally fresh and supportive in integrating. And I sense that I experienced for sure a shift in being. So now when I read the book, I'm reading it from a different space of being as I read it now. And that's really how it's quite eternal and fresh, this book, even though it has multiple markings and post-its and everywhere, my copy for sure. So with that, if there are no more questions, I'm going to thank Leon for your presence today.
You're very welcome. Thank
And
you.
and I really look forward to having some of you join us and be part of the last 10 seats that we have for the February program. Or like I said in the opening, is when you feel ready. The door is always open.
Yeah.
So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and spending some time with us. Greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.